Hey guys, hey, this is Mr. Culhane, and today what we're going to be talking about is the role of imperialism in Japan. Now you can see up at the top here I came up with a catchy title for this lecture. It's called The Land of the Rising Sun. And really what I want to focus in on today is for us to notice the differences, the contrasts between Japan's reaction to European imperialism and China's reaction to European imperialism. So just looking at this map real quick, a couple of the big players that we need to look for are, just give me one second, hopefully you know where Japan is on a map, but in case you don't, it is this chain of islands right here. Okay. Also, we are going to be focusing on the island of Taiwan, Korea, China, which I'm not gonna not gonna circle because it's too big, but within China, this section called Manchuria, there is a tiny city that we need to talk about right at the tip here of this peninsula called Port Arthur. So those are the regions we're going to be talking about. Now, just a little bit of background about Japan before we get too far along. Japan, before European intervention, was a feudal society. Basically, the way it worked was there were a group of warriors who were called samurai. Now, the samurai were military aristocracy, and what I mean by that is that they were very similar to knights in the Middle Ages, if that's a good comparison for you. They knew how to fight, they were good at it, and in return they got land, and if there was a war for the person that they swore their allegiance to, they would have to go fight for that person. Now, the person that they swore their allegiance to was called the daimyo. So the daimyo would be in control of the land, and he would give land to the samurai, and in return the samurai would give them protection, would give them, swear their allegiance. Now, the ruler of all of Japan was technically the emperor, but the person who held the real power was called the shogun. Now, he's like the military commander, he's like the top general, and he wielded all the real power within Japan. Now, in the 16th century, Portuguese sailors, if we're looking back over the map over here, come all the way around Africa and India, and they travel to Japan. So these are Portuguese sailors. With them, they bring firearms, guns. They also bring Christianity, and this creates a lot of turmoil within the Japanese society. For the first time, with these firearms, regular peasants who have no real military training are able to kill the samurai. So let's see if I can draw. So we got a peasant, he's got a gat, and he can shoot a samurai who's going to be holding this very bad example of a sword. And he pops a cap in his derriere, and this upsets kind of the balance of power within Japan. So there are a bunch of civil wars, and it tears Japan apart throughout the 16th century. But in 1615, a real powerful ruler whose name is Ieyasu Tokugawa, and you need to know Tokugawa, he establishes a ruling family, the Tokugawa dynasty, and they bring order back to Japan. Now, Tokugawa realizes that the real source of a lot of these problems come from European technology, European religions. So what he does is he outlaws any trading with the Europeans in 1639. So you can't carry firearms anymore, you can't practice Christianity, and only one ship from Europe is allowed to come to Japan per year, and they can only go to the port of Nagasaki. This time period where they close themselves off from the rest of the world is known in Japanese, I'm going to write it up here, because this is a term you'll need to know, is called Sakoku. Sakoku just means national seclusion. The entire country cut itself off from the rest of the world. And Sakoku led to a golden age within Japan. Their culture really flourished, they had a lot of peace, there were really no internal problems within Japan. This is when haiku becomes a prominent expression of art. This is when kabuki theater gains its kind of most ritualized form. Japan's doing okay within its own country. However, because it's limiting itself and not interacting with other people and other nations, they're starting to fall behind the rest of the world technologically. Now, in 1853, Sakoku's been going on for a long time now. In 1853, a fleet of American ships show up, and they say, Japan, you're trading with us. And Japan really can't stop them. The American Navy is too powerful, it's modern. The Japanese fleet doesn't stand a chance. Now here is really where the contrast with China starts off. China started to become very much controlled by outside powers. What Japan does, instead of being controlled by these Western powers, is they react instead. The shogun, the Tokugawa dynasty, gives up its power willingly. And in 1867, they give up their power and give it all back to the emperor. And they establish a new government, and it's called the Meiji. And basically what this Meiji government was all about was trying to adapt to Western culture and to try to pick out the very, very best of Western culture, but still remain distinctly Japanese. So we have this expression on the right. I just highlighted it for you. It says, "May our country, taking what is good and rejecting what is bad, be not inferior to any other." So the Japanese were not going to turn their heads away from Western culture like they have been doing within Sakoku, but instead they're now going to adopt the best aspects of Western culture and use it to their own advantage. So they adopt a Western legal system, a system of laws that is more equal to all the citizens within Japan. They start a public education program. They start, they start a modern army. No longer are they reliant on the samurai, but they start training a regular regular army. It's based upon the German army, actually. And they also start to build a modern navy because they had learned from the Americans that their navy wasn't up to snuff anymore. And they build an army, a navy that is very, very similar to the British Navy, which was the most powerful in the world. Basically, you can think of it as Japan starts to industrialize. They start to become westernized, but with that distinct Japanese culture. Now, The problem with Japan is that, as you can see on the map, it is a small group of islands. They don't have many natural resources, and you need that sort of stuff to industrialize. However, Korea does have a lot of those resources that Japan needed. But traditionally, China was the nation that was overseeing Korea. So what Japan does is they send an army into Korea, and they take it from the Chinese in what is called the Sino, that means Chinese, Sino-Japanese War. And we have a illustration from the war down below, the bottom left. The Japanese are successful. They are able to take over Korea, and also this larger section of China, this northeastern state called Manchuria, also very, very rich in natural resources, such as coal and iron and ore. The Western powers, the countries that were imperial, that were able to force their will upon China, were really alarmed that Japan had become such a powerful nation so quickly. So they were becoming very nervous, and Russia actually started sending soldiers all along the Chinese border in fear that the Japanese would continue to gain more land. And what Russia actually did is they controlled this little tip of China down here. This was actually part of Russia. And the reason why they wanted this piece was because it was called a warm water port. And again, this is called Port Arthur. This allowed the Russian Navy to have a place on the eastern side of the Pacific, excuse me, the western side of the Pacific, so that they could refuel their ships there. Now, they didn't want to lose that at all. Now, the Japanese really did want Port Arthur, and they wanted to continue expanding, so they launched a surprise attack upon the Russian Navy, and they defeated them quite handily. They also continued on the land, and they continued to attack Russia, and they did defeat the Russian army as well. Now, this was really the first time, and actually this war, it's not too hard, it's the Russo, that means Russian-Japanese War. It began in 1904 with the attack on the Russian Navy, and then ended in February of 1905. This was really the first time in the modern era that we've seen an Asian power defeat a Western power on a large scale. And it was a source of immense pride for the Japanese and even other Asian civilizations. And for the West, it was kind of a wake-up call, and it helped not destroy the ideas of social Darwinism and the white man's burden, but it definitely put a big chink in that armor, because the Japanese proved that they could be just as successful as a Western power, and they were non-white. The Russo-Japanese War was actually, like I said, it ended in February 1905, and the peace treaty was signed up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, which is kind of cool. And President Teddy Roosevelt was the one who oversaw the treaty. We're going to leave Japan off right there, and we'll see in future units that they're going to continue to expand. They're going to become more militaristic, and they're going to play important roles in both of the First and Second World War. All right, thank you very much.